again. Do you want to just check that link is working now? Test. Yeah. Hey everyone. I hope it's working all right now. Let us know if it's not. Welcome to week 21 of the G5A Virtual Cinema Club, where we meet every week to discuss two works of a singular filmmaker from, various countries, and we've been, exploring Asia so far, and we are, very excited to keep moving along in this journey. And there's going to be a few changes that we'll discuss towards the end of how we're going to be moving forward with the upcoming weeks as well. And my name is Neeraj. I'm a cinematographer based in LA, and
I'm Ishan. I work at G5A in Mumbai.
yeah. And so this week,
do we introduce the? I mean, did we?
No, we
just talk about mention the yeah.
Yeah. So this week we saw the works of Mouly Surya. She's a Indonesian filmmaker based out of Jakarta, and we saw two films of hers. The first one being What They Don't Talk About When They Talk About Love, and the second one being Marlina, the Murderer in 4 Acts. And so what they don't talk about when they talk about love, it's a handful to say, but that movie was one of her earlier films in, I forget what year it was. Was it 2013?
2005.
2005. Okay, so it's been a while.
No, 13. 13.
Yeah, that's
I was going to say 15, but I said 2005.
Okay.
2013, and Marlina was in 2017.
Yeah. So yeah, and so we'll just kind of dive right in, I guess. Right?
Yeah. I think we can just do it chronologically. I guess we can start with what they talk about, what they don't talk about. Sorry. When they talk about love, I think just we meant, or at least we might have discussed this in when we were like picking the films or choosing this one. I think it's like the title's taken from, or like it's inspired by a collection of short stories by Raymond Carver, which, and I mean, is a very, a personal favorite of mine, but also like, for a great American short story writer. And I think it's interesting because that short story sort of, and the title specifically, has been repurposed many times, right? And actually, as far as I know, that was the first, like that was the quote unquote original title. But if somebody else knows better, please share. Yeah. But I think, and then also another book that's titled similarly, which is a great read that I would recommend to almost anyone, is the memoir by Haruki Murakami, which is what I talk about when I talk about running. So it's kind of just like an interesting like device, I guess, in a title, right, to bring you into this, like a world of these kinds of ideas and things. And I think that's particularly what she does with this movie, right? Because it's a small change in the title where it's like where it says what they don't talk about when they talk about love. And I think it's an interesting one. I think from what all of the films we've seen, it sort of stands apart just because of like it feels more like capturing different moments, right? Like you were saying, and less. Just like kind of moments in these different characters' lives, rather than like a class conventional movie, or a
With an
story.
arc. It's a very
Yeah.
ensemble piece, and it has it's kind of,
Exactly.
centered around these two. Just to kind of give you guys some information about the film itself. It's about these, essentially two girls who are it seems like they're roommates, um, in this boarding school for people with special needs. Um, and one of them is blind. The other one is, she has she can see things, but they have to be awfully close to her, I believe, or something like that, from what I understood. Like, because she reads those notes and those
Yeah,
letters,
with
but with
those
those
with those
glasses.
glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, she's extremely, obviously visually impaired, I guess would be the word. And so it takes place in the school, and it's kind of following their I guess their search for love, in a way, at
Yeah.
this like kind of coming of age moment which they're at.
Mm.
Because I know in one of the scenes, she has her period for the first time, and she calls her mother, and
Yeah.
so it is a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
coming of age story in that sense.
Yeah.
Um,
I think also, in addition to that, it's also kind of showcasing, no matter like what sort of, um I don't want to say disabilities, but like, just like, if people are, um are differently abled, right, that there's still, that I think the main focus, or like, what was really, heartwarming about some of the moments in the film, is that it's just like this, they're very ordinary, right,
the
as
human
human beings.
emotion,
Yeah.
is universal. It's not.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That from like their perspective, the need for human connection, and I think that's kind of what she's trying to explore as well.
Yeah.
Even through the title, it is universal. It's not different in that scenario.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's also like, I feel like the treatment of it is very nice, in that, like, it doesn't make you, like, you're not like overly being told, like, oh, you should feel bad for these characters, right?
Exactly,
And I think that that's such a refreshing, like, interpretation, or like a portrayal of it.
because it can easily turn
um
into a pitfall for a movie like
yeah,
this.
exactly. And
Um,
something like, it becomes a bit like that, that's like the tone that it takes and
mhm.
assumes.
Well, yeah, because then it's like it can turn into kind of it can very easily turn into that and be like, you know, like they could have fallen in love with a normal person, and then they get disabled, and then this changes and that changes, and it can go into that almost, not melodrama, but it can become melodramatic in a way, just by the
Yeah.
virtue
Yeah.
of dwelling on those facts. But I think it moves past that very almost immediately. you know it starts in that world, and it stays in that world, and
Yeah.
it doesn't treat them as outsiders ever. It treats them as the central.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
um
And not as like othering
yeah, exactly.
these characters.
Which is
um
what I think is very interesting about her as a director, and the way she allows the viewer to, or the audience, to empathize with her characters, which we'll also see later on in Marlina the Murderer.
in Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so I think that's, and I'm sure, like, if we see other works of hers, to an extent
Yeah.
there'd be similar.
I mean, like, I'm just trying to think of what we can discuss about this one more, just because it seems like a slightly, like, a more difficult one to approach,
Hmm.
just because, like I meant, like, there are, like, it's got, like, it puts you in a sort of like mind space, right?
Hmm.
But it also, like, I remember thinking at times, like, it feels very real, to the point of, like it could be like a documentary of sort. Like obviously,
There's something
right? Like just
yeah, I agree, because there's something about it. To an extent, it almost feels mundane. It's not like,
yeah. I mean, yeah,
in
yeah.
the sense that it feels like normal
It's very like
life, and very like the way it flows from scene to scene. It, like, for example, there was this moment
exactly,
where she's brushing her hair and she counts from 75
and
to 100, like the number of times
yeah,
she brushes her hair every day or whatever it might be, and the routine of their lives and all of that. um and so all those beats and moments, like you said, it could become that othering quality, but it never does, because it feels
yeah, yeah,
so and then I think as a director, she takes her time with it. She never rushes through a scene or a beat or a moment. um
yeah. I mean, I think what was really lovely in that specific scene that you mentioned is that I think her roommate is getting dressed
in the
behind
background.
her, and yeah, and like out of focus, uh, like the whole time,
Yeah.
right? And it's almost like two scenes are going on
Mm-hmm.
within one scene, and yet there is like a quiet sort of like calming um like aspect about it, right? And it's not
Absolutely.
it doesn't it's not like it doesn't feel overwhelming like a lot of scenes we're used to, where there's so much action
Mm-hmm.
going on and so much of stuff just in the foreground, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really like it does so much work foreground and background without like being overbearing or in your face,
Mm.
and I think that's something
Just how she sets
that
up the
will
camera
just
in relation to the,
yeah, exactly,
and you'll see it in the, I mean, I think you'll see an evolution of that in Marlina as well, the Marlina the murderer.
yeah,
But what I think was really interesting in this one too was kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say the complete lack of, but the minimal usage of close-ups again. um a
mm,
lot of times she'll just let the scene play out in like a medium shot, where you kind of have that balance between what's your subject of the scene and then what you have in the background. um
right,
I think that was very cool. I think what's also interesting is, I mean, switching topics a little bit, but how she uses music and the sound
yeah,
design of it, because I think to an extent she was kind of, obviously, one of the characters is deaf, and so trying to kind of start using that as well as an element to kind of create that. I feel like when you don't have one of your senses, your other senses become a little more like acute and more
yeah,
like
yeah.
aware, and so I think
That is
she,
what they say.
yeah, so I think she like definitely played with that in terms of the sound design, and how, for example, when she's in that pool and she's um
Mm,
talking to that doctor, um they use the stones that they throw into the water, and like, you feel that. Ishan, hey, okay, I think you're back now.
I lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
um yeah, Sean, I think you're frozen. Your Wi-Fi seems to be a little. It was good for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back now. And frozen again. Sorry, guys, give us a second. Um, Okay, I can hear you now and see you. All right, you're better now. Cool. All right. So I don't know if you heard that.
You're still a bit frozen for me. No, I did not hear it.
Okay, so I was saying like
There you
how.
go. You're back.
Yeah, so I was just saying
I heard
how.
the bit about this up to the stones.
Yeah, so in the Stones, I mean, yeah, basically like how I feel like as even as personalities, they kind of know each other and what their disability is and how they can use that to
Yeah,
communicate with each other. And it's strange because it's things we take for granted in terms of like even recognizing other people, but in this case, it's like I didn't think about it until we started discussing it. Even the fact that they
yeah,
use certain tools to figure out, this is this person and this person has this disability, so I have to communicate to them in this specific way, for example, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh, and so it's something that and that's that once again gives is all credit to the director for not, like we said, making them other and making them kind of centering it
Yeah,
in.
and then also what's just building off of what you said is that like they know each other already, and there isn't like sort of like a forced introduction
Mm-hmm.
for us
True. True.
ever in the thing. And I think that's also, sometimes, that obviously takes it away from what I was saying earlier, where it felt like a documentary, right? And that's sort of where it begins to um, come back into,
It feels like you're watching real people just,
yeah,
do
exactly.
go through these like whatever, like this time frame in their lives. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. Did we have any questions or comments or anything as of yet for this section? I
No,
know
yeah, but no.
we know this film was a little harder to find.
Yeah, yeah, it
Um,
was kind of challenging,
so
but somehow wrangled it.
yeah.
Um,
And
but no, I think we can come back if we
yeah,
can always discuss the points later. But I think we can dive into
Marlene.
Marlina, yeah,
Yeah.
which I think does. I think it's sort of such a interesting. Like, it's first of all, it's so different.
It's so different. I loved it.
Yeah, it was great. But like just so. I just from like even the title, right?
Mm-hmm.
You sort of like it primes you for this journey,
I mean,
and you kind
I
of.
yeah, I walked in like expecting kind of like this legend of sorts, and it delivers on that
Yeah,
promise, you know?
yeah, exactly. Like I was gonna say, like you don't know what's going to happen, but like you're going on an adventure or like on a ride.
Yeah.
Like you're going on a trip, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just, and it's sort of from the beginning, from the title itself, it sort of gets you prepped for it. And I think that's something that's great. That like it was just so wonderful that it sort of from like start to finish, it sort of just like delivers on the whole like premise and just
Yeah.
like everything that
Yeah.
happens throughout. And it's like, like we were discussing, there's like sort of like elements of like fantasy, there's elements of you know um I guess just like folk or like
Folk
folklore
kind
type,
yeah. I think it
uh
pulls from like the Western in a way. It
yeah.
pulls from like a revenge story of sorts. So just for anyone who's, I mean, I know a bunch of you guys did end up watching the film, but for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, um, just to kind of set you up for it, and what we're discussing, basically, it's about this. So like what we don't talk about when we talk about love. You kind of just start in the middle of it, right? So the film starts with this man Marcus showing up at this woman's house, and very quickly you kind of understand that her husband has passed away and she's a widow now, and you find out basically that Marcus is gonna come with, a few other people are gonna join him, and they're basically going
He's sort of like the leader of this like
of this
gang
gang, and they're going to basically loot her farm and yeah,
and
rape her.
like for yeah.
basically that's their intention. And
And they like, and he like very matter of factly
states it.
lays it out.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it's also like he comes in there and he sits there, and I remember like thinking when I was watching it, I was like, does she know him?
Yeah,
Like, is
exactly.
there, you know? And then I was like, oh, okay. And then he's like, oh, he's like, give me coffee and like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, so I forget what it was,
Yeah.
beetle leaf.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, I'm your guest and stuff. And I was like, is this somebody that she knows but like isn't fond of? Like, what is the connection here? And then slowly it sort of like is revealed to you.
And
In just like and there's like no fuss.
yeah, she doesn't put up a fight or anything, and you're kind of questioning, is she just going to accept this? Like, it's very unsettling to start the film in that way, like you establish a conflict, but your protagonist kind of just accepts their fate, and you question that.
Yeah.
But then very quickly, by the end of that first chapter, first act, you kind of she takes control of her fate and destiny, and that's what's sets you off on this journey with her in this incredible way. I think I mean, once again, kind of speaking to what we saw in the first film, which you see kind of advance here, is these kind of longer drawn out takes, fewer close-ups,
Yeah.
and just
Those were like majestic.
Yeah.
Like where you have this whole I think the first one is like when she leaves, right? And then she's having that conversation on this bus or truck, and then like it's just the whole vista, and then you just like see it, the truck moving along like this.
Yeah.
And then like the whole conversation, and it was just like, you
don't need to see the characters, you understand everything. You get
exactly
even that shot, but even inside the interior of that house, when he comes and he's eating and she's going back into the kitchen, and then you have the husband you have the husband who's like mummified or preserved just in the corner of the room, which you don't even think about in a way until later on. And like all these, like kind of that element of like foreground, midground, background, and the layers of the image. It's incredible in that sense as well. And there's so much. It's the environment, and like, for example, the Indonesia. I'm assuming this was shot in Indonesia. The Indonesia that we saw on screen in Marlina the Murderer was nothing like the Indonesia I have imagined or I've seen through, like, pictures of friends and people who have traveled and all of that, which was like, to me, was just incredible, because I was like, I'm surprised that this countryside part of Indonesia isn't like, shown at all, because this is like and the way they've shown it is such a dry, arid, landscape, like a desert of sorts, almost, like I said, like it sometimes feels like a western when you have those dry landscapes, and her on the horse, for example,
exactly, with the head
with the head of Marcus, who she decapitates him and she carries his head around, and so like moments like that. And it's like you always kind of imagine like Southeast Asia as this like super green, lush, paradise of sorts, and it was so, I mean, shocking, but also just refreshing to see that, because I never knew that.
It also feels so vast, right? And like almost like continuous
and rural, and just
like but I mean, there's still like elements of modernity,
of course,
right? Like when you have you have the cell phone, that they connect, like they're very much like connected in that sense.
Exactly.
So like, where sort of like where this is rooted. And I think, I mean, also just going back to the interior, sort of like when you were mentioning background, midground, foreground, I remember that scene, where she's giving the soup out, right? And it reminded me of the tatami shot.
From also. Ozu.
And I was like, oh, this is, this sort of like, it was like a nice like callback to a lot of those films that we saw. And then it's just it was a different, like, it's a different
tone.
tone entirely. Yeah, it's different like
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere entirely, and just like the whole like I mean it feels like a very like quiet crescendo
Mm-hmm.
almost of a scene, right? Because we see her like making the chicken soup, and we see her like find these like sneak out these berries, right? Which
Or
clearly is poisonous,
yeah.
are poisonous, and she sort of like quietly puts it into the soup,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then so you're just like sort of like almost like
Mm-hmm.
holding your breath to find just like see how it plays out. Like, does she succeed,
Yeah.
in saving herself, or like what happens? And I think
And
that's like,
yeah, and then the film
um,
starts with a murder, it ends with a murder, which is like really cool. And then it ends with a birth
yeah,
after that, and this kind of like I was thinking
yeah,
about it, I was like, it's very symbolic in a way. It's like, they kill that I forget what his name is right now, but they kill that guy.
Marcus
No, well,
and
Marcus,
you mean the young
the
the young
younger
guy,
one, yeah,
the
the second,
rookie?
yeah, the rookie.
Yeah,
They kill him. She decapitates him similarly to how Marcus was decapitated, but
yeah, yeah,
then she, that friend of hers essentially ends up giving birth, and then they ride off on the motorcycle together, right? And I thought that was
yeah,
such
yeah.
a very just like from like a hero's journey or a
France,
heroine's
France,
journey, yeah.
heroines, yeah.
It's so it was really like this great moment in the like to the end, it's like they kind of are
Yeah, I
able
mean, it sort
to.
of comes around full circle in
Mhm.
that sense, right?
Yeah.
Um,
um
and yeah,
no, so I thought that was very interesting. Also, just from a musical standpoint, I thought there was, there wasn't a very like the instrumentation kind of keeps changing from scene to scene, and oftentimes music is used as a transition, which you'll see from like one, especially one act into the next act, and like all of those moments are also very well done. And I think that's what I really felt was very strong in this film from a
hmm,
directorial standpoint, was just the use of kind of the use of genre, but then breaking from genre at the same time to
yeah,
create like use tone. So there's like like it's western in a sense, but then there's also elements of supernatural because you have the headless body playing that instrument at times,
exactly.
and so there's like supernatural elements to it, and then there's obviously like the drama between that friend of hers and her husband, and how she's supposed to like deliver this baby, but it's been 10 months and things like that as well. And so I'd mentioned this, but it reminded me a lot in a sense of another film that does this very well, which is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I don't know if you've seen it, Ishan.
No,
um,
I haven't.
but also an incredible film by this Iranian. I don't know if she's Iranian American, but Iranian filmmaker. Um, Anna,
Nice.
yeah,
Maybe
um,
the title sounds familiar, but
yeah, Anna Lily Amarpour is her name. Um,
okay, okay.
so yeah, I mean, even that film, I think what it was interesting about it is like they take a few different genres, mix and match them together, and then add these other elements that kind of, you could say, stretch the limits of that genre, or could stretch
Yeah,
the
yeah,
limits, and in a very unexpected way. And then you kind of create this collage for this that fits this story
yeah.
so well in a beautiful way.
I
Um,
mean, it's sort of reminding me of this. So I listened to that the Sam Jones interview with Greta Gerwig,
yeah, same. I did too.
and kind of like what she's saying in there, right, about the stereotypical sort of like scenes or tropes
Mm-hmm.
for characters and like movie like plots, and how you sort of like take like one stereotypical like scene or scenario, and then like but remove it and put it in this unexpected situation, like circumstance or like world. And I think
Yeah,
that's
I think it's just
that's
putting a
also,
new lens. It's like putting a new
yeah,
lens on, right? It's like we've
exactly,
seen there's certain lenses that we've seen a certain story kind of told through. I mean, a story like this too, right? It's like, I mean, really at the end of the day, it's she's in trouble, she gets out of trouble, trouble is going to go find her, and she gets in trouble
yeah,
again, and she needs to find herself out of trouble. I mean, that's really at the
yeah,
end of the day, it's like kind of that back and forth of, you know, her versus these villains. It's a very traditional story. There's nothing really new to explore there, but I think it's the lenses and the tools that Mouly Surya uses that are
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
which I wouldn't say that it's not a fresh story, but it's a fresh way to look at the story, and that's what I
Yeah.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate about it. And I really enjoyed, and
And
it
and
has
I
its
feel like,
quirk.
yeah, and I feel like it's also, I feel like there's a level, a great sort of command of like restraint
Mm-hmm.
also,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the different elements that she employs. Because I think, I mean, clear example would be is the headless body like haunting her,
Mm-hmm.
right, of Marcus, who's playing this instrument and all. Like it could easily again become very melodramatic,
And
right, and
gruesome.
like very, yeah, and gruesome, but also like very just like, what is the phrase? Very like,
Gratuitous. Is that the word you're looking for?
no, just like not kitschy, but like very, anyway, I'll find the
Yeah,
word will come to me. But
I
like it
agree.
it could have it could have been like very just like stage, or just like, feel
Oh, I was thinking
over the
even
top.
and to that extent, which you just mentioned about the way that it's filmed as well, I think even the shot where, you know, she does pull out so she gets on top of him and then she pulls out the sword to chop
Mm,
off his head, and it's literally just one swift motion. There's no cutaway to
yeah,
the, you know, it's like it's one motion, the head rolls off, and it's done. And it's no like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
cut,
yeah, yeah.
cut. There's no like cut to see her reaction. You see the back of
Exactly.
her head. There's no like,
That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, it's it
It's very real in that sense, right? Like, I mean, it feels very,
well, it's not about the act, it's about her. It becomes about
yeah,
her,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. And it's also kind of like, um similar to, I think, some of the Korean films that we saw, right? It's very, like it, like, again, matter of factly
Mm-hmm.
portrays the scene, rather than like building it up and like showing it to you from like all these angles,
Mm-hmm.
and like all these, which sort of, like you said, like the more cuts you add, it sort of like forces you to
Invest.
invest in the, yeah, in the story and the characters.
Mm-hmm.
um
No, I 100%
and
agree.
yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting. There was another point that I had in mind, but oh, you know, my favorite scene of the film was when she winds up in that little town opposite the police station, and she sits across from
Mm,
that girl. And there's like, you know, there's that moment, and then there's like the moment a few, like after the police station, there's a moment where she's, you know, she takes the shower, and then after that, there's another moment where the girl sits next to her, and they have this conversation. And the camera's right behind them, you know, you don't see their faces ever. You don't need to see the whole range of emotions on their face. It's
yeah,
just it's like these, I mean, semi silhouettes. They're kind of in
yeah,
shade, and it tells you the entire like relationship between them without having to make those cuts and make, you know,
yeah,
go that
exactly.
extra. It's, I think there's so much what she tends to do is like there's so much magic in the implied as opposed to like the, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
blatantly told part of the story.
Absolutely. I
Um,
mean, I think that shower scene also was wonderful, because it was,
mhm.
like you could barely see them, but you knew like everything that was happening
Yeah,
almost.
yeah. I don't know.
And I think,
Personally, for me, like in the past few weeks, this has probably been like the favorite, at least virtual cinema club movie we've seen for me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In the past few weeks at
No,
least.
I mean, it's definitely like stands out, just like
Yeah.
very, without shouting.
Mm-hmm.
Like it stands out very like in sort of like a quiet, confident way.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so, and we got a few like responses actually
Oh, great.
to,
Let's go through them.
on both on, the live chat and on
Telegram.
the Telegram group. So,
So let's do this.
yeah, so I'm just gonna read them out. Um, so the first one's from Priyanka on the Telegram group, which says, "I love the silences and the way sounds are used throughout. It sort of creates a beautiful imagery and
Mm-hmm.
curiosity."
Mm-hmm.
Which I, yeah, I mean, I think that's that's a really great way of describing it.
Yeah.
Because I think those like almost like super wide shots sort of add to that, and then you've got this like mix of like the music or score plus like ambient-ish sound.
Yeah, like there's a good sense of soundscape in the film throughout.
Yeah.
Like you said, the ambient sound, you because the thing is, like, for example, like one scene that does this very well is the one that you mentioned, where it's the wide shot of the bus car going through those winding roads, and you're seeing this conversation, or you're hearing this conversation. So you have like you feel like you're inside the vehicle, but you're seeing this vast expanse, and you have this ambient sound and beautiful soundscape that kind of gives you a sense of the remoteness and the emotion of that, that expanse of land, like you were saying earlier, and kind of going to what Priyanka was saying as well. So
And
so absolutely.
Sorry.
No, absolutely agreed. I mean, I think it's very and even the musical notes, I think, are very interesting, because with the headless man, you have that instrument. I don't know what it's called exactly, but
I was trying to like look up.
Which is it sounds like it sounds and looks like a very like folk instrument type of thing, like something a little more rural. But then you do have like a more traditional, not even traditional, but more like synthesized sound with some of the scoring elements that are not from.
So there's that like balance again of like of the folk and sort of like modern techniques. Also, which is kind of nice. And so just to continue with some of Priyanka's comments, she said it had an almost Tarantino-like quality, but not as dramatic. And then not pretentious. And she said the end of Act 2, the music, the horse, and the head have a complete Western vibe, which is something that we were discussing. So. And and she mentioned the storytelling was so much from a woman's perspective, and very naturally so, and it doesn't feel force fitted at any point. And I think, I mean, just adding, like she also commented on that soup scene that we were discussing, and just like highlighting Marlina's expression as the four men sort of drop dead, like each one drops dead. And I think that I remember is like her face is like very,
she's very
got
stoic.
like an interesting, exactly.
And it's throughout the film. She really doesn't ever give too much emotion, I think, throughout the film. I think the one time you start to see her kind of, and she doesn't say much actually as well. That's the other interesting thing that I just realized. Like, she doesn't say much, but she doesn't even emote much, and so she's very silent in a way. And as a protagonist, that's interesting, because it's hard to convey as a director through your character all these like complex emotions of her being a recent widow, and all this that's happened to her, without saying or emoting much. And the one time she opens up is with that little girl.
When they're on, but also interestingly, she's backing us, right? So when she does like start crying, and the girl hugs her, we don't really see the facial expressions, right? But we know, and we sort of feel that weight from the rest of the film.
Exactly.
And then let me see what else was there.
Because on that note, like, even when the cops kind of tell her like, oh, it will take a month for us to get the kit to test you, and stuff like that, she doesn't be like, why can't you get it now? She doesn't fight back ever. She's very like,
but also, like, I feel like that whole thing, like, I mean, he lays it out pretty clearly that, like, we don't have money, this, that, and I feel like it's one of those, it's sort of like she just accepts her fate very similarly
at the beginning
to how she accepts it in the beginning, right? And it's not like there isn't that sort of like indignant quality or like aspect about her, and I think that's something that like we see through the film.
Exactly.
And but all right. And then there's a comment by Aditya on the Telegram group, which says the performances were so brilliant. There was such a poise. I wanted to know how the director. Okay, so a question: how the director explains to the actors to bring out so much through the silences, since there was not much camera movement. I guess my question is about the blocking and mise en scène of this movie, which is a
Great
great
question.
big question.
Yeah. So I mean, the blocking of it that we kind of spoke about a little bit earlier, we touched upon it. It was like, I think a lot of it is if it's a wide shot or a medium shot or whatever, it's about the usage of the foreground, midground, background, right, and the layers of it, right. So similar to like an Ozu type of scene in a sense, I
Yeah,
think, at least that's what I can, obviously we weren't there, so we don't know what happened in person, but I think it's like that's what we can take from it, right, when you see it. It's the use of the layers and then how the characters can maybe move through that space. Even for example, when so the scene when Marlina sits at that little restaurant cafe type thing and the girl brings her the satay. There's really two shots. There's the one shot which is straight on with Marlina and she's sitting there, and the girl kind of, if you notice, she comes into frame, she goes past, brings the satay, she sits at the table behind her, and then
yeah,
she comes, once she takes the first bite, I think she asks like how is it, and then takes a seat in front of Marlina, and
exactly.
then you cut. So you have like that kind of that going into the background, coming back towards the camera, foreground element.
Yeah,
And then only when the girl sits to that seat in that opposite Marlina does the camera cut to a profile where you see both of them sitting across from each other, right? And so
yeah,
and
yeah,
so I mean that's another example of kind of how you can think about how they set up the blocking, and then once they kind of figured that part out, they figured out you know what might be the most interesting thing to do with the camera in terms of creating those layers and the depth
yeah.
in the frame.
But also, like, I guess, how do you get them all to like work together, right? Like, if you have
Mhm.
um, this character
Yeah.
that is sort of will express herself in this kind of restrained way, like how do you get her surroundings and her, like, the characters around her, and also just what you're showing viewers to sort of complement that as well.
I mean, I think a lot of that is just the idea of having like a lot of conversations with the entire team, right? So I
Yeah,
think I think like obviously like the director and the actor probably, really set up, for example, this is who the character is before the film even, right? So you kind of know, it's not like
yeah,
see, that's the thing that I think we have to like always kind of, it's important to think about because I think we maybe don't think about it when we watch a film, but these characters have a life before the film and a life after the
and
film.
yeah, oh yeah,
And
exactly,
so there's a personality that's, for the character at least, that's developed over these years. So for example, like yeah, in a normal scenario, if you were a widow and this guy came to loot and take over your house or whatever, you would be angry or whatever. That would be the expectation. But then if
yeah,
you
yeah,
really spend the time with the actor to develop the character and who the like kind of the
like
personality of the
who she
character,
is,
and
who is, yeah, yeah,
then you would really inform how she would react in this moment, because there's like the obvious, but then there's the obvious reaction, but then there's like the character's reaction, and that's the difference.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think,
I
yeah.
think in terms of just to like add a bit, like an obvious, I guess there's like a perceived reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like from an outside, when if you sort of lay it out, like this is the circumstance, how would you react, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is, say, like A, B, C, D are the things that have happened. How would you react to them? And like, you would, because you that if that's all the information you're operating with, right? That's what
Well, you
you would
would,
be like, okay, this has happened to me. I will be upset,
well, in your
right? Or like I will
analogy,
be angry.
what see the interesting thing is in your analogy, it's like the perceived thing is you have A, B, C, D, and so you expect E and F, right? But when you really
Yeah,
develop a character, what you're doing, and I think, is you have like A, B, C, D, and you jump to like H or I, but then E, F, and G are all in the subtext, and it's very like
Right.
it's internalized, and it's because
Yeah. Yeah.
you still feel the anger and the pain and everything she's going through in
Right.
those
Right.
moments where she's thinking about putting these berries in the chicken soup, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sadness and the
All of that.
anger and
Absolutely.
all those little
No, I mean,
beats.
that's a great way actually to put it. But because I was thinking, I was thinking from that is that what it might also be is that as a viewer, right, we
Hmm.
only see,
What we're
say,
shown.
just to continue with the letter
Yeah.
thing, is like we only see B and C,
Yeah.
right, and A is something that's happened in the past that we don't know about, right,
Exactly.
and then again, like you're saying, D, E, F is in that like subtext, or is sort of like unsaid, right,
Hmm.
but you sort of it go,
And that's where the
and then you
performance
get,
can show it.
yeah, yeah,
Very much
exactly,
so, because it's not like the thing is we got to the point of where she poisons them and murders them, right?
yeah,
But we never felt like we jumped a step. We're not like, oh, how did she go into that mode? No, we saw the build up
yeah,
into
yeah,
that moment. And
exactly, exactly,
so it's not like we're like skipping any steps. It's just the way we see it and the way
right,
we kind of get to that point is really different.
exactly, exactly.
Which is really interesting. So that's, I mean, so that's a great question. Whoever asked that, was it
Aditya,
Aditya? Yeah,
Aditya.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if we fully answered your question, but
I
hopefully,
think we sort of like
yeah.
got to some level of direction. I think that that it obviously will. Like we've seen in so many of the films and conversations in the past, like it's so specific to not only, like, there's so many variables involved, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
director, story, actor, character, like all of those things coming together. Like it's sort of that um, the coming together of all of those things
Mm-hmm.
that gives us what we're seeing. And then there's so much work well before any scene is shot. I think is
Absolutely.
the sort of is that like takeaway, at least for me. That like all of this goes into building those scenes way before you're actually on set or like on location.
Yeah.
And we're sort of, I think, like as viewers at least, you sort of can sometimes take that for granted because you see everything in its intended or final, let's say,
Yeah.
not intended
Well,
always,
for
but final
example,
format.
I mean, one thing that we never really think about, but it's very important, and like when I'm working on a project, sometimes you have to think about it because in a script, it might just say interior kitchen, interior dining room, interior living room. But in reality, what's the relationship of these three different spaces? From a, for example, so in the movie like this, the area where they're eating, the door right behind her is the door where Marcus is sleeping, where she's
Yeah,
going to go and kill Marcus. Now, whether that was something that was like a happy accident where you have that sense of that relationship of those two spaces being that close, or if that was something that had to be
yeah,
built and purpose built for what the script was giving them or what was thought through. And so like I mean even like something as simple as two scenes where she's killing these people in the living room and then she's going to the bedroom to kill Marcus, but you have to think
yeah.
about that relationship between those two spaces even. And so things like to that
Exactly,
detail
exactly.
can, and in the world of film, I mean, depending on what your budget is, can be completely constructed as well. So
Yeah, yeah,
and those are like you were saying, things that we take for granted and sometimes we don't necessarily, when we're watching, we don't think
yeah.
about. But the geography of a space, because the actors are really going through a
Hmm.
space, is a big part of it,
Yeah,
and how you want those spaces
absolutely.
to
Yeah, no,
feel.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, and I think it's also like one of those things I feel, right, is like if you do it right, what like a good outcome is that people don't notice, right, and it sort of
absolutely.
goes unseen in some senses. But then obviously, if you don't do it well, that's like the first thing that people will like call you out on,
Hmm.
which is kind of like an interesting
Yeah. And like,
sort of just like a reality.
and then that with like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like if you blend that with kind of like what the cinematographer's job is. He made that living room area feel like this big central space, but then when you get to the bedroom, it does start to feel closed off and a little more claustrophobic, and a
it
more
does.
intimate room.
And then it's also just how we see it, right? Because we're also like backing her. We don't see her carrying that tray with the soup and like all of that. Like it's also just like the way it's shown to us, because that area where the men were sitting, because of the shot and the sort of the setup, right? It feels expansive, like you said.
Yeah.
But and also because we're seeing them like head on.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's the like it's interesting because it's this blend of so many people working together to get to this final project, and sometimes it's just chance, and sometimes it's all very thought through. So you never, and unless you actually ask them, you really wouldn't know the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Did we have any other questions, thoughts from anyone? I know we went through.
No, I think that was
all of Telegram, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Anything on YouTube live?
No, not that we haven't. We went through the stuff.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah. So.
Oh, there's one question.
Cool.
One more, a new one on YouTube from Sukriti, which she says, I'm just wondering how the angry / violated woman taking matters into her own hands, takes lives trope has been treated in other similar movies. Does anyone have any comparisons? Oh, that's an interesting. I haven't seen it, which maybe I shouldn't be saying or revealing that I haven't seen. But is Kill Bill?
That's exactly what I was thinking as well, and I haven't seen Kill Bill either, which is why I was like, that's the only movie that immediately came to my mind, which was like maybe there's something there, but I actually haven't seen it either, so I can't comment. If anyone has seen Kill Bill and wants to chime in on that question, I'm trying to think
I think that's
other films.
I just know it because it's so iconic, right? In that sense.
I mean, maybe.
Also Tarantino.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking like even like maybe you could say something like, for example, The Handmaiden. Right? It's not like necessarily violent, and it's not this whole thing, but you have that moment where, as the princess, she does turn against her. I forget now. Was it adopted father or father? And she she does take matter into her own hands, and she does kind of.
She does, and then they sort of do trick the men into doing their own
the dirty work, really.
Yeah, like doing what they want.
Yeah. That's the only other movie I can immediately at least think of.
I'm trying to think of what.
But what was the question exactly? Just repeat it for me.
So I'm just wondering how the angry / violated woman taking matters into her own hands / takes lives, like that trope has been treated in other similar movies. And then she has to follow up. I think it would be interesting to see the difference of how a woman director treats it versus Tarantino.
That would be very fascinating. Like absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed.
I'm trying to think now what other
films have done that in the past.
I'm just blanking on. This is like when someone asks you like, what's your favorite movie or what's your favorite book / author, and you're like, I don't know any books or movies or authors ever, and like you're like I've never come across any.
Yeah, if you have any films that you'd suggest in that vein, that because it's not coming to me at the moment, at least. But yeah, you're right. I think that would be a very interesting thing to observe, and I mean, eventually we will probably, who knows when, get to the Western world. With the cinema club.
I guess like the modern like depiction of like Harley Quinn. Just I'm thinking of like female characters that sort of like act on their own
accord,
or like sort of like act against society for what they've experienced. But I don't really know if that's think she fits that
Harley
role.
Quinn. Yeah,
Jessica
maybe.
Jones.
I haven't seen
Sorry,
Jessica Jones.
no. It's sort
I mean, the
of
thing is,
sort of
but
like
the
that,
thing is,
but
like, the biggest thing that's really happening here is that she's acting. It's this is very reactionary, right? It's like for her, she's not normally this person with Marlina. She's kind of almost forced into this situation, right? And I
yeah,
think that's what's really interesting. It's a very the thing with like any of these like Harley Quinns or any of those characters, it's not like they're forced into that situation. It's like they are these larger than life characters, whereas here she's
sure.
kind of forced to become her own hero to save herself.
Yeah,
I think that's what's really interesting. And I think, I mean, just knowing
and
Tarantino, I don't know if Kill Bill even really fits that bill. Sorry. If Kill Bill really fits that, like, fits that
that mold. Yeah,
mold, so to speak, because his films are also very larger than life. Um,
yeah,
what film I would recommend though, Sukriti, is to watch A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. It's been many years since I've seen it, which is why I'm not able to like. I don't want to reference it and reference it wrongly, but I would
mm,
say check out the film because tonally and genre bending wise and all of that, it's
yeah.
very similar, but also because um, it does have a female protagonist, and it it's just a beautiful black and white noir film, or pulls from noir
Mm,
aspects, and it's a vampire film and this and that. Yeah.
interesting. Priyanka had a sort of a follow up where she said that she thinks this is the difference between the hero's journey and heroine's journey,
Yeah.
and quite defines the treatment in this sense, which I need to like read up a bit more
Mm-hmm.
on the differences,
Yeah.
or like just
Absolutely.
more specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's something that I know that we can like discuss offline on the Telegram group,
Yeah,
and
I
then
know Priyanka has a chart diagram JPEG.
yeah,
If she wants to go ahead and send that in the Telegram group for everyone, that would be great because it's a really great reference.
yeah. It's a great reference.
I have it somewhere as well. I just have to find it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like pull it up as well.
Uh, and
Mm. Okay,
yeah,
but I think I'm not sure if there are any other comments or questions. She said we'll do, so I think she'll post it.
sounds great.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking very quickly if there was anything else about Marlena the murder that was like. There's a lot to discuss about this film. I mean,
yeah,
it's it's staying with me for a while. I feel it's gonna stay with me for a while. I really loved
for
it.
sure.
Um,
Okay, I've got the thing. One second, I'm just posting it in the Telegram group.
mm-hmm. Perfect. And then, do you want to go ahead and make the announcement about how we're going to be moving forward with
Yeah.
Virtual Cinema Club in the coming weeks? I'm really excited about what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a few interesting weeks ahead of us with the Virtual
Yeah,
Cinema Club.
yeah. So what we're doing now is this. I guess this would be the time when we'd announce the director for next week. But what we're doing is just sort of taking stock, because we're sort of 21 weeks, plus minus, given the week that we have to skip and whatever. We'll never talk about that again. Um, but I think what we're doing is that we're going to switch to a fortnightly, and we're going to change the frequency a bit and do the sessions fortnightly, so that gives us and people more time to watch the films and sort of just like let them sort of marinate a bit, and also we might plan a few special things. We get one or two more people on the session specifically, and maybe they worked on that film or with that director, or in some sense loosely in moving in that direction. And finally, we're sort of toying with a new time, and we'll have the sort of like switch the session in that it'll be Saturday night for Neeraj and Sunday morning for us here in Bombay. We'll sort of post about all of the updates specifically on the Telegram group and then like on social media and stuff. But I think the new time, what we said, is about 10 a.m., right? 10 or 11 a.m. We'll sort of fix that.
Yeah.
And then the next session will be in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So we'll be doing it every 2 weeks from now on moving forward. And and just so you guys all know, we are finally moving into India, and so we're going to be doing Indian filmmakers. So some films you may have seen, some films if you haven't, and if you've seen them, I would highly recommend revisiting them under these kind of new guiding questions and like ideas that we've been kind of discussing the past few weeks, which were really, I mean, I've seen some of these films as well, so I'm really excited to revisit them and just kind of look at them a little more closely. And by doing the bi-weekly setup, what we're hoping to do, and I'm also very much excited about this, would be like, you know, if we can find additional materials, kind of like how we did with, for example, the Inglourious Bastards scene that we did last week, maybe a script or maybe a scene from the script or some, you know, additional information we can send your way that would, you know, kind of guide
just round out the watching and like conversation experience.
So just a deeper, like just really try to dig deeper than we have been, but I think we could, there's, now that we're moving into a territory of films that, you know, we're familiar with, but also filmmakers and technicians and all these other people we're going to be potentially having access to and, you know, talk
also
with.
just a bit closer to home, right? So I think it makes sense to focus even more than we have been doing.
So it's going to be a great chance for us to do all of that, which we're all very excited about. And so and I think now that we're approaching films that are in a language where we might not all need subtitles, for at least for some of the films, I know there's some regional films that we'll be doing as well. Try and get more of your friends on board, and it'll be great to have more more people, you know, join us.
I mean, I think it was great. I mean, it was great today. Like some of the questions and like comments and responses were really like they just added to the discussion. You know, I think that's really what we
love.
That was our main intention. With doing the cinema club, you know, we sort of wanted to find the best way, one, to watch the films, and then how do we just understand all of the various moving parts that have been put together and like discuss them, you know, not from like a film appreciation point of view, but just from like a watching point of view. And knowing what we're really seeing.
That really helps us.
That's so we'll look forward to those announcements, and then we'll get watching. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, guys. Take care.
See ya.